time for questions or open discussion. Thank you, Harper, for this wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
Anybody?
Anybody questions?
I know there's one in here.
I think we have one right here.
So, Arthur, one of the things you started out with is something that musicologists and ethnomusicologists talk about is a space or geographic location that has a certain sound. So Nashville Sound, Philadelphia Sound, Memphis
Right.
Sound, all these places.
Mhm.
And you start out by talking about a Minneapolis sound with this that would have produced him. Can you talk about some of the, if you know, obviously, again, I'm coming out of musicological left field.
Right.
Can you talk about some of the sort of institutions or different kinds of musicians that Prince might have encountered that would help him sort of
Right.
help be an outcome or a product of the Minneapolis Sound?
Right. Well, there's a number of musicians that Minneapolis was quite different than many other places, which goes beyond many different places, but there's a lot of it that goes beyond my familiarity specifically. But one of the things I can say that Prince, there was a culture in Minneapolis and Prince really, a culture of Minneapolis that the world, America never thought existed, sound that didn't really exist. And it was a unique space. And so Prince's success allowed these other artists who were percolating for years to finally have a platform, where Prince supporting him, having a platform to exhibit their music, and it led to a whole slew of artists who came out. Now, some of the artists who were there that influenced him was, again, quite a number of, which goes beyond my actual familiarity. But I can say some of the people who he actually worked with became icons in the business. Two members of his band, original band, was Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, also from Minneapolis. They went on to produce probably one of the greatest songwriting production duo of all time, notable for Janet Jackson and some other artists as well. You had a number of acts that he was in his band as well that also went solo, had different types of success. But one of the things I found interesting is that a lot of people, because of Prince, because of what was happening, because of what he brought to the forefront, people started to gravitate toward Minneapolis. You had folks from Ohio and other parts of the U.S. saw Minneapolis as a destination ground because of Prince, because of what he undisclosed, what he was able to disclose there in the sound. So that's what my response there. Again, there was a lot of artists going on there, and list too long to name, But yeah, the whole sound came out of Minneapolis, a whole bunch of groups as a result of his efforts. Yes.
Singing, you met your term the cool pass.
Uh-huh.
That was a powerful pass because the aspects that the drum machine, the funk, the things that made it
Right.
cool for the urban were not things that would have flown with the people I grew up with.
Right.
White suburban Pennsylvania.
Right.
But the things that wouldn't flow with you
Right.
flew with me. The guitar,
Right.
that obnoxious riff at the beginning.
Right.
If it had been in the middle of the bridge section, it would have made it a metal song.
Right.
If and what else? You could take some of these pictures, you could put them in Poison, and he'd be a member of the band.
Right.
It would
Right.
fit.
Right.
So it's amazing how his crossover genius is.
Right.
To me.
Yeah, and it's interesting, and one of the things I mentioned is that when Doves Cry, he was experimenting. Like Prince, my understanding, had this kind of very interesting relationship with rap music. He liked the edginess, he liked some of the boldness of it, but the music aspects of it, everything being sort of artificial, and being a musician was something he kind of didn't, embrace. But when Doves Cry, he embraced the drum machine. This thing was taking off, and he was like, no, let me try this out. And he employed it in the song, and it turned out to be quite successful. And one of the things I also argue, there's something there. There's something that goes beyond the song itself for the song to remain #1 for 8 weeks. There's something there. It's very personal that I try to interrogate and bring out. That's often unspoken. What is it about this song? And of course we have the music videos, which I didn't talk about. As a music videos and a visual image scholar, I can talk all day about music videos and so forth. But there was also influenced by the music video as well, and the movie soundtrack, which was the movie, which was quite successful, which also fueled why it stayed on the charts and everything for so long. But there was something organic within the song itself, and the music cadence of the song that drew so much support from fans, particularly those in the Black community, African American community. Yes.
After this came out and right around it, there were sound copycats, and there are people that just
Mhm.
followed along with the audio aspects of this. But what were some specific songs or artists that carried on the comprehensive message that he did from the lyrics as well as the sound, and moved forward in this time that he influenced specifically with his song?
Specific songs?
If you know, or any ideas of artists that would, if somebody said, I really identify with that, where else were they going to find similar messages, similar ideas, comprehensive ideas?
That's a very good question, and that kind of goes beyond the realm of my focus, how we influence other artists immediately afterwards. And it was very difficult to sort of copy that. It wasn't too many copycats of Prince per se. There were some guys who he recorded with who tried to use that image. There was one guy named Jesse Johnson, who was a guitarist. People thought he was like Prince, but there was also Andre Simone, who was actually Prince's band, who tried to establish his own identity. But his identity seemed to be very close with Prince. Now, did it influence his music? Prince's music influenced him. Well, they played in the band together. Des Dickerson, another guitarist who was in his band, I think tried to go solo, but again, he couldn't escape, the Prince aura, and was also constantly compared to Prince. So it was very difficult for artists to be successful in trying to replicate what he brought out there. It was very difficult, and I'm not sure off the top of my head there was too many success stories, following it there.
Growing up, I was baffled by how many women loved Prince, right? My mom included, honestly. I mean,
Yeah.
and everybody I knew was just a huge fan of him. This
Right.
guy's about 5 foot tall,
Right.
wears high heels,
Right.
ruffles, feathers. I mean,
Right.
just all not feathers, but
Right.
the most flamboyant kind of style. Sometimes,
Right.
chaps that had everything hanging out. I mean, I was just
Right.
amazed at what he was able to wear
Right.
and the amount of attention that he got. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on it. But very few people thought of him as being anything but heterosexual
Right.
with all of that happening. And so
Right.
I wanted to I thought that was an amazing contradiction and
Yeah.
complexity.
Right.
Maybe it was because Apollonia and some of these other women were
Right.
around him that people were
Right.
so enamored by themselves, right?
Right.
Sheila E., etc. But I just wanted to see if you wanted to, because that was an interesting part you talked about.
Yeah,
please.
and as a young man, as a teenager, just going into my teens, I was a paradox because his video was everywhere.
Right.
Everyone, women, gravitated toward him. The girls that we admired was like talking about Prince. So it was really difficult to sort of explain. You couldn't put that in words.
But this is a guy issue, this isn't a woman's
It's
issue.
about this whole notion about masculinity.
You guys go ahead and do we don't care.
Right.
Complexity of the women's
In the age of Mr. T, this
Right.
was the opposite. The clean cut, the guy can dance,
Right,
he could
right.
move, and he could talk to a girl.
Right.
While Mr. T would be, ugh.
Right. And a couple of things, one of the things that it's also very important too, the context of the time, because I was saying before, you had this voice, rap music was coming just of age. This is when albums started to come out. We have albums, and some of the artists I described who were help defining masculinity, and then you have this Prince thing. Prince, this narrative. So that was sort of the paradox, because these guys spoke to us. They were more accessible to us. But what Prince was doing was also acceptable to us, but though it was difficult to admit that because that meant something different from what is considered normative masculinity. And normative to that community. Yeah. And also, one of the things you had mentioned interesting too is that you had other artists who were similar. You had guys like Ready for the World, of this band. You also had the group, mentioned the group Poison. These other guys who had big hair, Bon Jovi. These guys, but because of the racial factor, they were always put in it's a different place. So we see that's kind of different. I always thought like Culture Club and Boy George. I thought that was interesting, but we never quite could play because particularly Culture Club, and this is kind of get off topic. They firmly situated their music in a form of music that we were familiar with. Those songs. Karma Chameleon, Time, Clock of the Heart, etc. What Culture Club fit into what was deemed acceptable. So the visual elements, they were kind of embraced-ish, embraced, a little bit more. But Prince, to have this individual who was immensely talented, was in many respects he was the antithesis of Michael Jackson in many respects. to a certain extent, yes.
Just to steer back towards that part of the discussion, there is, of course, a rich history of androgyny in American popular music that, takes on lots of different meanings in various contexts, and you did a great job of putting Prince into that context of the 1980s, of post-industrialism and all of that. One of the people who's almost always mentioned as a major influence on Prince is Little Richard, of course, and there is in that whole history of androgynous images among pop music superstars, the African American thread within that history has particular complexities for some of the reasons that you articulated, and I'm just wondering if you had thought about or looked at responses to somebody like Little Richard in his prime, because there's some of the same kinds of questions that come up in the way that he was challenging notions, popular notions of black masculinity in the context of the 1950s rock and roll era, and the kinds of responses that he got from young men and young women, and the kinds of insinuations that are written into his songs and so on. Could be some really interesting comparisons to be made.
Yeah, you bring up a very interesting point there. I haven't really gone and looked at the 1950 time period, but what I do understand is that you have this sort of start to have the split. I mean, you have this is when James Brown starts to come in, and of course you have other guys who's Chuck Berry, who's playing the guitar. Chuck Berry, and so it'd be very interesting to see how the reaction was to Little Richard. At the same time, you had these other guys coming out who came out of the black church, who had a lot of connection, a stronger connection, maybe than what Little Richard had.
Sam Cooke is really.
Oh, Sam Cooke. That's an old.
Yeah, there.
Sam Cooke is hope. Oh gosh, please don't bring up Sam. Sam, there's one. Sam. Okay. But Sam Cooke probably had influence on Prince as well. Maybe he might have had some influence as well.
Yeah,
absolutely, definitely.
I was just going to share an anecdote that you call to mind, and this dates really from the late 70s. I first became aware of Prince when a coworker, this was a young African-American woman, probably high school grad, probably not a college grad, had gone to see him at a concert this was around Raleigh, North Carolina. And she came back and she was very excited. I mean, but what I specifically remember her being just blown away by was, I mean, great music, but he's performing in a G string. And she wasn't quite sure if this guy was straight or gay or some combination of the two. And along with that, in the local, this is when people were still, we still got newspapers. In the local newspaper, one of the big stories was about how a local dry cleaner had the experience of cleaning his clothing, which was, soaked with sweat. These were the two images that I remember. But I remember her specifically. She was completely sold on him as an artist. But there was a lot of mixed messages in there. There were a lot of mixed messages. So well, whatever.
Yeah, he was definitely a chameleon. He couldn't quite fit. I mean, the controversy around his sexuality, around his racial identity, he kind of addressed in the song Controversy, which came out, the album, which was his third album. He came out, a song called Controversy. One of the lyrics I remember is, am I straight or am I gay, am I black or am I white, controversy. So he's addressing it, but he's not really answering the questions, which continues the mystique of Prince, an aura. Why folks who came in later on and encountered him in 1984 still had these sort of questions because they were never sort of answered, But that's part of the selling point, which he definitely embraced.
Just one last thought about this. Another of the many dimensions of Prince that complicates this whole discussion is the fact that he was a virtuoso electric guitar player. So, I mean, that picture that you have up right there, is good evidence of, the phallic symbolism of the guitar and that whole, running history of guitar gods, which in some ways was reaching an apex in the 1980s.